If you were to look at art today, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be art in this way, but even media.
Oh, yeah.
Do you see any style or type of content, for lack of a better word, the 21st century word, that you think does a similar thing in trying to ingratiate itself to power?
It's difficult for me to talk about, I suppose, what is the art of power now, which I think is what you're asking me. But one thing I do often think is that I'm often kind of relieved when I see something that has retained something of that resistance to the idea of perfection in whatever form, whether it be in something that looks kind of handmade or, maybe doesn't conform to the idea of the spectacular, mind-blowing monument that an artwork can sometimes be, whether through very shiny surfaces or through very expensive materials. I mean, if you think about an artist like Jeff Koons, for example, who is an artist who's like a pop artist working now in the 21st century and doing, humongous sculptures of, the Pink Panther or, Mickey Mouse or very like an Andy Warhol figure. People used to think, oh, well, he's kind of poking fun at corporations and stuff and the media and all that. But actually he's not, because the amount of effort he puts into having these things made, they cost millions of dollars, right? And they have teams of people working on them. And he is like a corporation. So, and he creates these weird, the sort of balloon that you'd buy your kid at the zoo or something. It's like some mylar thing in the shape of a heart or whatever, or a tulip, and he'll take that exact thing, blow it up 25 times, make it out of steel and aluminium, and make it so bright and so shiny that it looks like something from another planet, right? And that will be like at Versailles, which is the royal palace of the French monarchy, from the 18th century, and that will be sort of in the door as you walk in. And it's like, this is impressive, and it's sort of cheeky maybe because it's like low culture meets high culture. But the way it's made and the kind of investment, he actually has to go out and raise money to afford to pay for the manufacture of these things. And when you see them, they're quite mind-blowing. They're just spectacular. I'm just always a bit wary of any art that is trying to wow you. And frankly, I do, if I may just make one reference to a contemporary thing, I do feel a bit that way about Yayoi Kusama, particularly some of these later installations. There's a little bit of that, particularly the way that they're orchestrated at the moment. It's all a little bit like as if nothing's too good for you. And if you look at her earlier work, there is that kind of resistance, the materiality, the idea that there's a thing there made by a person, rather than a kind of, scattering of neurons in an all-enveloping environment, which can be quite disorienting and I think distracting, and serves a purpose culturally to distract us from what's actually real.
Maybe this is not relevant to your interests, but since you mentioned being skeptical of art that tries to wow you, do you have any views on what art should try to do?
I do. I hesitate to mention it, but I guess, between you and me and hundreds of thousands of listeners, I guess I have a view which is a reflection of the sort of person that I am and the age that I am, and at the end of the day, it has to do somewhat with what I was saying earlier about the importance of materiality. And materiality which is not being leveraged or kind of instrumentalized to try to convince you of something else. So what I mean is when you have a thing in front of you and it's trying to say, I'm not what I say I am. I'm not what I am, I'm what I say I am. Right? So I quite like artworks that are extremely honest about how they're made, what they're made of, where they are, what they are, which means I'm a modernist, essentially. The truth to materials thing, which is an old, long-standing ideal, going right back to the late 19th century or the Bauhaus, for example, in the 30s, that in modernism, the idea of honesty, that you're not trying to trick people. You're trying to say, if you're making a canvas, you don't go, oh, look, you can walk into this wonderful world, pretend you're not here. You go, no, this is a two-dimensional surface. It's got strokes of paint on it, or this is a slab of marble. It's kind of made out of rock. It's, it's made out of a geological process that took, billions of years and all of that. So that to me, I guess at being a modernist, there's always this kind of sort of suspicion about the idea of illusion, that illusion can be suspicious because of its ideological implications. However, there's a caveat to that, which is that any art that, in my mind, that tries to deny the fact that it's actually an illusion is in some ways worse, because it's a kind of another lie, because all art is essentially based on illusion of some sort. Anything that tries to represent anything else is saying it's, I'm not what I say I am, but it's sort of how you do it. If you sort of reveal your process, it's a little bit like transparency in government, or if you go for a job interview, you don't get it. You get to find out what happened, what the thinking was, what was the process. I suppose that's the kind of art that I really admire and really find exciting and thrilling and compelling. But, there are lots of different purposes to art, and I think one of the problems with the perspective that I have inherited about art, the modernist one, which I just described to you, is that it does tend to look down its nose at references to the past. And if I may I think this is a good segue, but just a really important thing in the book I wrote, which is called Italian Modern Art in the Age of Fascism, came out about 5 years ago, still relevant though, I think, is that I had another argument in there, which was that a lot of the art in that period has been ignored or disdained over the years, particularly by English-speaking scholars. And there are many reasons for that, partly because of its being mixed up with fascism, so it was kind of taboo. I mean, we've sort of started to unpack that a little bit. But the other problem is that a lot of that art was very interested in speaking about the past and using the styles of the past to kind of talk about the present. And people like me, if I was around at that time and I had the view that I have about art now, I probably would have gone, no, that's not okay. You're not allowed to do that because progress. We've moved away from the past. Like the futurists I described earlier, Marinetti, in 1909 said, let's burn down the libraries, let's flood the museums, let's get rid of the past. And, that's all very well, but there's a cost, right, to doing that. And modernists are guilty of pushing the past away too quickly or pretending it's not there or kind of making it taboo. And when you do that, it kind of comes back as a repressed thing and comes back to bite you. And what I was really interested to talk about in this book is to really honour, I suppose, the artists who, instead of just being pure modernists and just moving away from tradition always and saying the new thing, actually wanted to engage with the past, not to want to go back there, but to actually use the past as a kind of critical leverage to say something about the present, And so I think it's important to remember those things, because I really do think there's a danger in and I think also because a lot of people want to have nice memories about the past. They don't want it to be destroyed like Marinetti suggested. And if you suggest that to them, or if you don't give them an outlet, they'll go and find their own version of the past and bring that back, which could be worse.